They say the most dangerous person in the world is a woman who has stopped fighting and started planning. Marcus Sterling thought he had it all: the high-powered job, the beautiful mistress, and the faithful wife waiting at home with his newborn son. He thought he could live a double life forever. But when he returned home after a night of passion, he didn't find a fight. He didn't find tears. He found a house stripped to the studs, a sold sign on the lawn, and a silence so loud it would shatter his entire existence. This is the story of how one man lost everything in a single sunrise, and why you should never underestimate a mother's instinct. The digital clock on the dashboard of the Mercedes GLE gleamed a soft neon blue. 4:12 a.m. Marcus Sterling killed the engine, letting the silence of the upscale suburban neighborhood wash over him. His shirt still smelled faintly of Jessica's perfume, a cloying scent of vanilla and expensive jasmine that stuck to his skin like a second layer of guilt. He rubbed his face, trying to scrub away the exhaustion. He had told his wife, Eleanor, that the merger with the firm in Chicago was running late, requiring an all-nighter at the office. It was the oldest lie in the book, but Marcus was arrogant enough to believe he had reinvented it. He grabbed his briefcase, rehearsing the tired smile he would use if Elena was up feeding the baby. "Rough night, honey. The partners were brutal. How's little Leo?" He walked up the stone path to his Georgian-style estate, the pride of his life. He had bought this house 3 years ago, when his architectural firm finally hit the 7-figure mark. It was his castle. He slid his key into the lock. It didn't turn. Marcus frowned, jiggling it. What the... He pulled the key out, checked it, and tried again. It wouldn't budge. A sudden flash of irritation spiked in his chest. Had Elena changed the locks? Was this some petty reaction to him missing dinner last week? He moved to the side of the house, intending to go through the garage, but stopped dead in his tracks. The moonlight hit the front lawn, illuminating a wooden post that hadn't been there when he left yesterday morning. It was a real estate sign. A red banner was slapped diagonally across it, in bold, aggressive letters. Sold. Marcus blinked, sure he was hallucinating from lack of sleep. He stepped off the path and walked onto the grass, his Italian leather shoes sinking into the damp soil. He touched the sign. It was real. Cold wood. Vinyl lettering. Sold? Panic, cold and sharp, pierced his confusion. He ran to the large bay window of the living room and cupped his hands against the glass to peer inside. The room was empty. Not just tidy. Empty. The custom velvet sectional sofa was gone. The antique oak coffee table, the grand piano he played on Christmas, gone. The walls were bare, stripped of the art collection he had spent 5 years curating. Even the curtains had been taken down, leaving the windows looking like hollow, skeletal eyes staring back at him. "Elena?" he whispered, his voice cracking. He ran to the back door. Locked. He picked up a heavy garden stone and, without thinking of the consequences, smashed the glass pane of the French doors. The sound of shattering glass tore through the quiet neighborhood, but he didn't care. He reached in, unlocked the latch, and stumbled into the kitchen. The echo of his own footsteps was terrifying. The kitchen island, usually cluttered with baby bottles, mail, and Elena's herbal tea, was wiped clean. The refrigerator door was open slightly, the light off, the shelves bare. He sprinted up the stairs, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. "Elena! Leo!" he screamed. He burst into the master bedroom. The California king bed was gone. The walk-in closet door stood open, revealing empty racks. His suits, his watches, his shoes, everything was gone. It was as if he had never lived there. But the real horror waited for him in the nursery. He ran down the hall to the room, painted a soft sage green. He pushed the door open, bracing himself to hear the soft coo of his 3-month-old son, Leo. The room was a void. The crib was gone. The rocking chair where Eleanor spent hours nursing was gone. The changing table, the diaper pail, the mobile with the spinning stars, all of it vanished. In the center of the room, on the plush carpet that was the only thing left, sat a single, small object. It was his cell phone bill. Marcus walked toward it, his legs trembling. He picked it up. It wasn't the bill itself. It was a printout of his call logs from the last 6 months. Highlighted in neon yellow were hundreds of calls and texts to one number, Jessica Vance. And clipped to the paper was a handwritten note. The handwriting was elegant, sharp, and unmistakably Elena's. The merger didn't run late, Marcus, but your time did. The house is sold. The assets are liquidated. The locks are changed. Don't look for us. You were too busy looking at her to notice I was packing. Marcus dropped the paper. The silence of the house wasn't peaceful anymore. It was a tomb. He pulled out his phone and dialed Elena. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. He dialed the house landline, realizing as he did so that the phone jacks had probably been ripped out of the wall. He dialed his lawyer, Arthur Penhaligon. It rang 4 times before a groggy voice answered. "Marcus, it's 4 a.m. "Arthur, where is my wife?" Marcus screamed, pacing the empty nursery. "Where is my son? The house is empty. There's a sold sign on the lawn." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Arthur spoke again, his voice was devoid of the usual friendly warmth. It was cold, professional, and pitying. "She triggered the clause, Marcus. You signed the post-nuptial agreement 2 years ago when you started the firm. Remember? The fidelity clause." That was just legal jargon. "It was a binding contract," Arthur said. "Proof of infidelity results in the immediate transfer of marital assets to the injured party to secure the welfare of the child. She sent me the evidence yesterday morning. Photos, texts, hotel receipts. It's ironclad." "You let her sell my house?" Marcus roared, veins bulging in his neck. "It wasn't your house, Marcus," Arthur said quietly. "Technically the deed was in her name because of your business liability. She sold it to a cash buyer yesterday afternoon. The funds are already offshore." "Arthur, you have to stop this. I'm coming to your office." "Don't," Arthur said. "I no longer represent you. I represent Elena. And Marcus, if you try to approach her or Leo without a court order, she has a restraining order ready to file. Goodbye." The line went dead. Marcus stood in the center of the dark, empty nursery. The smell of fresh paint and baby powder was gone, replaced by the stale, dusty air of abandonment. He sank to his knees, the highlight on the phone bill glowing in the moonlight. He was homeless. He was alone, and the sun was just beginning to rise. To understand how a woman cleans out a 5,000-square-foot mansion in 12 hours, you have to understand Elena Sterling. Elena wasn't just a housewife, though Marcus often treated her like one. Before Leo was born, she was a logistics manager for a global shipping conglomerate. She knew how to move things. She knew how to organize chaos. And, most importantly, she knew how to spot a discrepancy in the manifest. 6 months prior, Elena had been doing the laundry. Marcus had left his jacket on the chair. Careless. He was getting arrogant. She found a receipt in the pocket. It wasn't for a hotel or a dinner. It was for a diamond tennis bracelet. Elena didn't own a tennis bracelet. She didn't scream. She didn't throw the vase across the room. She felt a cold, metallic taste in her mouth, like sucking on a penny. She put the receipt back exactly where she found it. That night, she cooked his favorite risotto. She listened to him complain about the partners at the firm. She smiled. She kissed him good night. And then, while he slept, she unlocked his phone. He had changed the password, but Marcus was a creature of habit. He used his graduation year, 1998. She found the texts, Jessica, the photos, the promises he made to this 24-year-old intern about leaving his boring life behind. Elena downloaded everything. She emailed the files to a secure, encrypted account. Then she put the phone back. The next morning, she didn't confront him. She initiated what psychologists call the grey rock method, but with a twist. She became the perfect, supportive wife, all while she was severing every tether that bound them together. She visited Arthur Penhaligon, the family lawyer. Arthur had been Marcus's father's friend, but he had a soft spot for Elena. More importantly, Arthur was a man of the law, and the post-nuptial agreement Marcus had signed, laughing, saying he'd never need to worry about it, was brutal. "If I execute this," Arthur had warned her, looking over his spectacles in his mahogany-panelled office, "it has to be nuclear, Elena. If you leave a crack in the door, he will wiggle through. He's a narcissist. He will try to destroy you." "I don't want to destroy him, Arthur," Elena had said, her hand resting on her pregnant belly. "I just want to ensure he doesn't destroy us." The plan took months. She slowly moved her personal heirlooms to a storage unit, claiming she was decluttering for the baby. She transferred her inheritance into a trust for Leo that Marcus couldn't touch. She monitored his schedule, waiting for the perfect window. That window opened when Marcus announced the Chicago merger trip. The moment his Mercedes pulled out of the driveway on that Tuesday morning, a fleet of 3 moving trucks pulled in from the opposite direction. Elena was a general on a battlefield. Living room to truck A, nursery to truck B. Everything in the office marked, "Marcus goes to the dump," she commanded. She had hired a liquidation firm to buy the furniture she didn't want. The house sale was a masterpiece of timing. She had listed it as a pocket listing, off-market, months ago. A wealthy tech CEO from Silicon Valley had been eyeing the property. She closed the deal via digital signature at 2 p.m. By 6 p.m., the house was a shell. By 8 p.m., she was at the private airfield. She looked down at Leo, sleeping soundly in his carrier. He had his father's nose, but he would have her strength. Her phone buzzed. It was Marcus. A text. "Landing in Chicago. Miss you both. Kiss Leo for me." She didn't reply. She pulled the SIM card out of her phone and dropped it into a trash can at the terminal. As she boarded the plane, she felt a phantom pain in her chest, the morning of the life she thought she would have. But as the engines roared to life, masking the sound of her own shaky exhale, she knew one thing for certain. Marcus wasn't coming home to a tragedy. He was coming home to a consequence. Marcus sat in his car until the sun was fully up. The sold sign mocked him in the daylight. Neighbors were starting to come out, people he had barbecued with, people he had impressed with his stories. He saw Mrs. Gable, the elderly gossip across the street, peering through her blinds. He couldn't face them. He reversed the car, peeling out of the driveway, and headed straight for the bank. He needed cash. He needed a hotel. He needed to hire a private investigator. He walked into the First National Bank branch with the confidence of a man who still believed this was a fixable error. He approached the teller, a young woman named Sarah, whom he had flirted with harmlessly in the past. "Marcus." "Good morning." She smiled, though she looked at his disheveled clothes with confusion. "Rough night?" "Something like that, Sarah. I need to make a withdrawal from the joint savings." "Sure thing." She typed on her keyboard. Her smile faltered. She typed again, harder this time. Then she frowned. "Mr. Sterling, I'm seeing a hold on this account." "A hold?" That's ridiculous. It's a joint account. Yes, but the primary account holder initiated a freeze pending a family court review, and she hesitated. The balance is zero. Zero, Marcus shouted. The security guard near the door took a step forward. I deposited a $50,000 bonus check last week. It was transferred out yesterday, sir, to a trust account. Since it's a joint account, either party can move the funds. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. Check the business account. Sterling Architecture. Sarah looked uncomfortable. I can't access that, sir. You're listed as an authorized signer, not the owner. The business is registered under the Sterling Family Trust. The trust that Elena's father had set up for them when they got married to protect the family assets. Marcus had always assumed he controlled it. He had signed the papers without reading them thoroughly, too busy drinking scotch with his father-in-law. He had been a guest in his own life. I have no money, Marcus whispered. You have your personal checking, Sarah offered helpfully. Balance is $400. $400. He couldn't even pay for a week at the Ritz with that. He stormed out of the bank, his hands shaking. He got into his car and slammed the steering wheel. He needed an ally. He needed someone who was on his side. He dialed Jessica. Hey, baby, her voice purred. Back from Chicago already? I thought you were stuck in meetings. I never went to Chicago, Marcus snapped. I was at your place, remember? Whoa, cranky. What's wrong? Elena knows. She knows everything. She cleared out the house. She took the kid. She froze the accounts. There was a silence on the line. A long, calculating silence. She froze the accounts? Jessica asked, her voice losing its sultry edge. Like all of them? Yes. I'm locked out of everything. I need to come over. I need a place to crash until I sort this out with the lawyers. Marcus, Jessica said. The sound of a lighter flicking echoed in the background. That's really intense. But my landlord is coming over today for an inspection, and my sister is staying on the couch. Jessica, I have nowhere to go. I bought you that Cartier necklace last week. And I said thank you, she replied sharply. Look, Marcus, I don't do drama. Wives, lawyers, frozen assets. That sounds like a you problem. Call me when you get your black card back. Jessica. Click. She hung up. Marcus stared at the phone. The betrayal stung, but it was nothing compared to the dawning horror of his reality. He wasn't the powerful architect Marcus Sterling anymore. He was a man with a tank of gas, $400, and a suit he had worn for 24 hours. He looked at himself in the rearview mirror. His eyes were bloodshot. His stubble was graying. Okay, Elena, he snarled at his reflection. You want a war? You got one. But he didn't know where the battlefield was. The drive to the office was a blur of adrenaline and denial. Sterling and Associates was located in a sleek, glass-fronted building in the financial district, a building Marcus had designed himself. It was the physical manifestation of his ego, sharp angles, imposing height, and intimidatingly modern. He parked the Mercedes in his reserved spot. CEO and founder, the plaque read. He touched it for reassurance. Elena could take the house, she could take the kid. But she couldn't take this. This was his genius, his sweat equity. He smoothed his wrinkled shirt, ran a hand through his hair, and strode into the lobby. He needed to project power. He needed to look like a man who was handling a minor domestic hiccup, not a man whose life had just been detonated. The receptionist, a young girl named Chloe, who usually greeted him with a bright, "Good morning, Mr. Sterling," didn't look up. She was typing furiously, her shoulders hunched. "Chloe," Marcus barked, walking past the desk, "get Julian on the line, And bring me a black coffee. I'll be in my office." "Mr. Sterling," Chloe said, her voice trembling. She finally looked up. Her eyes were red. "Your key card. It won't work for the executive suite." Marcus stopped. He turned slowly. "Excuse me?" "Mr. Thorne. Julian. He had security change the access codes an hour ago. He said you're to wait in the conference room, the glass one, by the entrance." The fishbowl, that's what they called it. It was where they put junior associates when they were being reprimanded. "Get Julian down here, now." Marcus didn't wait. He walked to the glass doors of the executive wing and slapped his card against the reader. A harsh red light blinked. "Access denied." He kicked the door. "Julian, open this damn door!" The heavy oak door at the end of the hall opened. Julian Thorne, his business partner of 10 years, walked out. Julian was a man of few words, a structural engineer who made Marcus's artistic visions stand up to gravity. He was usually disheveled, covered in chalk dust or blueprints. Today he was wearing a suit. He walked to the glass door but didn't open it. He stood on the other side, looking at Marcus like one looks at a rabid animal in a cage. "Open it, Julian," Marcus warned, his voice low. "I can't do that, Marcus," Julian said, his voice muffled by the soundproof glass. He pressed a button on the intercom so they could speak. "The board convened an emergency meeting at 6 a.m. We voted." "The board? I am the board. I own 51% of this firm." "You owned 51%, Julian corrected. "But you leveraged 20% of your shares last year to cover your gambling debts in Vegas, remember? You thought nobody knew." Marcus froze. He hadn't told anyone about that. "And," Julian continued, pulling a file from under his arm, "the remaining 31% is held in the Sterling Family Trust, which, as of this morning, has been frozen due to pending litigation regarding gross moral turpitude." "Moral turpitude?" Marcus laughed, a hysterical barking sound. "I had an affair, Julian. Half the clients we work with have mistresses. Since when is this a church?" "It became a problem," Julian said, his eyes hard, "when you billed your mistress's expenses to the Miller account. The hotel in Chicago? The jewelry? You expensed it as client relations. That's embezzlement, Marcus. That's fraud." Marcus felt the floor sway. He had. He had been sloppy. He thought he was untouchable. "Elena," Marcus whispered. "She sent you the books." "She sent us everything," Julian confirmed. "And she sent it to the Miller Group. They pulled the contract an hour ago. That was a $40 million project, Marcus. It's gone. We're doing damage control. Security is on their way up to escort you out." "You can't do this to me! I built this!" Marcus screamed, slamming his fist against the glass. "You designed the facade, Marcus," Julian said, turning his back. "But the foundation was rotten." Two burly security guards appeared behind Marcus. One of them held a cardboard box. "Mr. Sterling," the guard said, offering the box, "your personal effects from your desk. Please come with us." Marcus looked into the box. A framed photo of him and Eleanor from their wedding day lay face down on top of a stapler and a stress ball. He was escorted out of his own building, through the lobby where the interns stared and whispered, and onto the sidewalk. It started to rain again. He walked to his car, throwing the box into the passenger seat. He tried to start the engine. It sputtered and died. He looked at the dashboard. Remote immobilization active. Contact leasing agency. "No," Marcus groaned, hitting the steering wheel. "No, no, no." The lease was in the company's name. Julian had cut the car off. Marcus Sterling, the architect of the city skyline, sat in a bricked luxury SUV in the pouring rain, clutching a box of office supplies, with no home, no job, no money, and no way to move. He let out a primal scream that was swallowed by the indifferent city noise. Then he grabbed the photo of his wedding, smashed the glass against the dashboard, and wept. The Sunset Inn was a misnomer. There was no sunset, only the neon flickering of a pawn shop sign across the street, and it certainly wasn't an inn in the quaint sense. It was a roach motel off the interstate, the kind of place where people went to hide or to overdose. Room 114 smelled of stale cigarette smoke and industrial cleaner. Marcus sat on the edge of the sagging mattress, staring at the peeling yellow wallpaper. It had been 2 weeks. He had sold the Patek Philippe watch for $4,000, a fraction of its value, to a shady jeweler who knew Marcus was desperate. That money was his lifeline. He had spent the first 3 days drinking cheap whiskey, wallowing in a toxic mix of self-pity and rage. He drafted hundreds of texts to Eleanor, ranging from begging forgiveness to violent threats. He sent none of them because her number was still dead. He had tried to go to the police to report a kidnapping. "She's his mother, sir," the desk sergeant had said, looking at Marcus's unshaven face and rumpled suit with disdain. "And you have no custody agreement in place. She has every right to travel with her child, unless you have proof she's endangering him." Marcus had nothing. On the 4th day, he sobered up. The rage crystallized into a cold, hard purpose. He didn't want forgiveness anymore. He wanted to win. He wanted his son. He opened the phone book. He didn't have a smartphone data plan anymore, and found a listing for a private investigator. Vince Moretti. "We find the unfindable." Vince met him at a diner. Vince was a small, wiry man, with grease stains on his tie, and eyes that darted around the room like a nervous sparrow. But he was cheap, and he was willing to work for cash. "So, the wife pulled a gone girl on you, huh?" Vince asked, chewing on a toothpick. "She kidnapped my son," Marcus corrected, sliding an envelope with $1,500 across the table. "I need you to find where she went. She used a private airfield. Teterboro. The flight logs are sealed." "Nothing is sealed if you know who to bribe," Vince grinned, pocketing the cash. "Give me 3 days." Those 3 days were an eternity. Marcus paced the motel room. He ate instant noodles made with tap water. He watched the local news on the grainy TV, half expecting to see a report about a missing socialite. But there was nothing. Elena had vanished without a ripple. When Vince finally called, Marcus ran back to the diner. Vince looked less cocky this time. He looked annoyed. "Your wife is good," Vince grunted, sliding a piece of paper across the sticky table. "She's really good." "Did you find her?" "I found the plane. It filed a flight plan for Zurich, Switzerland." Zurich? Marcus's heart sank. Switzerland. Non-extradition for certain civil disputes. Banking secrecy. "Yeah, but here's the thing," Vince continued. "The plane landed in Zurich, all right, but she didn't get off." "What?" "The manifest shows the plane landed empty. It was a decoy, Marcus. She filed a false flight plan. The plane made an unscheduled stop in Bangor, Maine, for refueling before crossing the Atlantic. Nobody got off in Zurich because she got off in Maine." "Maine?" Marcus frowned. "Why Maine? We have no connections in Maine." "Maybe that's the point," Vince said. "I tracked a rental car rented under her maiden name, Elena Vance." "No, wait. She used a different name. Elena Sterling is dead. She used a passport you probably didn't know she had. An Irish passport. Her grandmother was from Cork, right?" Marcus searched his memory. Elena had mentioned Irish heritage, but he never paid attention to her family history. It bored him. "Name on the rental was Elena O'Connell," Vince said. "She drove north, then the trail goes cold. She ditched the rental in a long-term parking lot at a bus station in Portland. From there, she could be anywhere. "She's in Maine," Marcus whispered. The realization hit him. She hates the cold. She hates the ocean. She always wanted to move to Arizona. "She went where you wouldn't look," Vince said. "Smart lady." "Find her," Marcus commanded. "That'll cost more," Vince said, tapping the table. "I need travel expenses. I need to bribe bus ticket agents. I need another $2,000. Marcus checked his wallet. He had $400 left from the watch money. I don't have it right now." Vince stood up, buttoning his cheap coat. "Then I don't have a location. Call me when you have the cash, Mr. Sterling. But a word of advice. If a woman goes to this much trouble to hide, maybe you should let her stay hidden." Vince walked out. Marcus sat alone in the booth. He was close. He knew the state. Maine. He went back to the motel. He looked at his possessions. He had nothing left to sell, except one thing. He reached into the lining of his suit jacket. He pulled out a small velvet pouch. Inside was the diamond engagement ring he had bought for Jessica. He had planned to give it to her the night he returned from Chicago, to convince her to be patient while he figured out how to leave Eleanor. Jessica had never seen it. It was worth $10,000. He stared at the diamond. It represented everything he had done wrong: the greed, the lust, the stupidity. He walked to the pawn shop across the street. "How much?" Marcus asked the broker, a man behind bulletproof glass. The man squinted at it. "No papers, no receipt." "It's an heirloom. I'll give you $2,000. Cash. It's worth 10. Take it or leave it, pal. You look like you need a hot meal." Marcus took the money. He didn't call Vince. He didn't trust Vince. He packed his single duffel bag. He walked to the Greyhound station. He bought a one-way ticket to Portland, Maine. 3 months passed. Winter in Maine was a physical assault. The wind coming off the Atlantic felt like razor blades. Marcus had never known cold like this. In his previous life, cold was something he observed from behind triple-paned glass while sipping a brandy by the fireplace. Now, it was a constant companion. He was living in a boarding house in Portland, sharing a bathroom with a fisherman and a retired line cook. He had grown a beard, not a stylish designer stubble, but a thick, unkempt mask that hid his face. He had lost weight. The tailored suits were gone, replaced by flannel shirts and heavy boots he bought at a thrift store. He went by the name Mark Stone. He worked odd jobs, day labor, unloading fishing trawlers at the docks. It was brutal, back-breaking work. His architect's hands, once used to holding fine drafting pens, were now blistered and calloused. But the physical pain was a distraction from the mental agony. Every night, he sat in the local library, using the free public computer. He became a digital ghost hunter. He scoured real estate listings in every small town in Maine. He looked for property sales that matched Eleanor's pattern: cash buys, quick closings, secluded locations. He searched for Elena O'Connell. Nothing. He searched for birth announcements. Nothing. He was losing hope. Maybe Vince was wrong. Maybe she really was in Zurich. Maybe she was in Arizona. Then, on a Tuesday in November, he made a mistake that turned into a miracle. He was looking at a local community blog for a town called Bar Harbor. It was a tourist trap in the summer, desolate in the winter. The blog was covering a local winter solstice craft fair. He was scrolling past pictures of homemade jams and knitted scarves, his eyes glazing over. Then he stopped. Photo Daruja 42. In the background of a picture focusing on a woman selling beeswax candles, there was a figure walking away from the camera. A woman in a thick grey wool coat. She was pushing a stroller. It wasn't her face. He couldn't see her face. It was the scarf. It was a distinctive scarf. Cashmere, patterned with a specific tartan design. The Sterling family tartan. Marcus's mother had knitted it for Elena the Christmas before she died. Elena had always said it was too itchy, that she would never wear it. But here she was, wearing it. Maybe for warmth. Maybe for comfort. Or maybe because she thought nobody in this God-forsaken frozen corner of the world would know what a sterling tartan looked like. Marcus zoomed in until the pixels blurred. The stroller was high-end, a bugaboo. The way she walked, head high, shoulders back, a purposeful stride. It was her. He felt a surge of electricity that almost knocked him out of his chair. "Got you," he whispered. He spent his last paycheck on a bus ticket to Bar Harbor. He arrived as a snowstorm was rolling in. The town was shuttered. The grand summer cottages boarded up against the winter. He found a cheap room above a tavern near the water. He spent a week watching. He didn't know where she lived, so he watched the choke points, the grocery store, the pharmacy, the post office. On the 5th day, he saw her. She was coming out of the island grocer. She looked different. Her hair, usually highlighted and blow-dried to perfection, was darker, pulled back in a practical messy bun. She wore no makeup. She looked tired but peaceful. She was carrying a bag of groceries in one arm and holding Leo against her chest with the other. Leo was big now. He was sitting up, looking around with bright eyes. He wore a blue hat with bare ears. Marcus stood across the street, hidden in the doorway of a closed souvenir shop. His heart hammered so hard he thought he might have a heart attack. He wanted to run across the street. He wanted to grab her. He wanted to scream, "That's my son!" But he froze. A man walked up to her. He was tall, wearing a rugged parka and carrying a stack of firewood. He wasn't a rich suit. He looked like a local, a carpenter, maybe, or a lumberjack. He smiled at Eleanor, a warm, familiar smile. Eleanor smiled back. It was a genuine smile, one Marcus hadn't seen in years. The man reached out and tickled Leo under the chin. Leo laughed. The sound carried across the snowy street, piercing Marcus's soul. The man took the grocery bag from Eleanor. He put his other hand on the small of her back. They walked together, toward a beat-up Subaru Forester parked at the curb. Marcus felt a nausea so violent he had to lean against the brick wall. Who was he? It had only been 4 months. Had she replaced him already? Or a darker thought crept in. Had she been planning this part too? Was this man part of the escape plan? Marcus watched them drive away. He memorized the license plate. He wasn't just fighting for his son anymore. He was fighting a ghost from a life he didn't even know she had. He pulled his collar up against the snow. He wouldn't confront her in the street. That was sloppy. That was the old Marcus. The new Marcus, the one forged in the freezing docks of Portland, would wait. He would find where they lived, and he would take back what was his. He followed the tire tracks in the fresh snow. The tire tracks led 5 miles out of town, winding up a narrow logging road, flanked by dense pines, heavy with snow. The Subaru Forester had struggled up the incline, its treads leaving deep, churned-up scars in the white powder. Marcus walked in them, his boots slipping on the ice hidden beneath. The cold was a physical weight now. It sat on his chest, making every breath a labor. But the fire in his gut, the toxic mix of rage, entitlement, and a twisted sense of fatherhood, kept him moving. He smelled the wood smoke before he saw the house. It wasn't a mansion. It was a cabin, a sturdy A-frame structure made of cedar, with a wraparound porch and a stone chimney puffing grey smoke into the twilight sky. It looked warm. It looked like a home. Marcus crouched behind a snow-covered woodpile, his breath misting in the air. He watched. Through the large front window, he could see the golden glow of the interior. He saw Elena walking back and forth, rocking Leo. She looked content. She looked safe. Then the back door opened. The man, the one from the grocery store, stepped out onto the porch. He was wearing a flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up, despite the freezing temperature. He grabbed an axe leaning against the railing and walked down the steps toward the woodpile where Marcus was hiding. Marcus held his breath, pressing himself flat against the dark side of the logs. The man stopped 10 feet away. He set a log on the chopping block. Thwack! The sound of the axe splitting the wood was like a gunshot in the silent forest. Thwack! Thwack! Marcus studied him. He was younger than Marcus, maybe late 20s, muscular, but in a functional way, not a gym-sculpted way. He looked capable, dangerous. "Caleb, dinner's almost ready." Elena's voice drifted out from the open door. The man paused, wiping sweat from his brow. "Coming, El? Just splitting enough for the night." El, a nickname, a familiarity that made Marcus's teeth grind. The man, Caleb, gathered the wood and went back inside, kicking the snow off his boots. The door shut. The lock clicked. Marcus waited. He needed to know the layout. He circled the cabin like a predator. He found the fuse box on the side of the house. A cruel smile touched his cracked lips. He didn't want to just knock. He wanted to terrify. He wanted them to feel a fraction of the helplessness he had felt standing in his empty nursery. He waited until the lights in the kitchen went out and the glow moved to the living room. They were settling in. Marcus reached into the fuse box and yanked the main breaker. The cabin plunged into darkness. Inside, he heard a gasp. Then, the man's voice. "Power's out. Probably the wind. I'll go check the generator." "Be careful," Elena said. The back door opened again. The beam of a flashlight cut through the snow. Caleb stepped out, heading toward the shed in the backyard where the generator likely was. This was it. While Caleb was distracted in the backyard, Marcus moved to the front. He tried the door. Locked. He looked at the window. He didn't want to break it and let the cold in on Leo. Some twisted paternal instinct still remained. So he used a credit card, an expired one, the only plastic he had left, to shimmy the lock on the older, wooden frame. It was a trick he had learned from a contractor years ago when they got locked out of a job site. The lock tumbled. The door creaked open. Marcus stepped inside. The heat hit him first. It smelled of pine, cinnamon, and roasting chicken. It smelled like the life he had thrown away for a cheap thrill in a hotel room. "Caleb?" Elena's voice came from the darkness of the living room. "Did you fix it already?" Marcus didn't speak. He closed the door behind him and locked it. He stood in the entryway, the fire from the hearth casting long, dancing shadows across his face. Elena was sitting on the rug in front of the fire, Leo playing with wooden blocks at her feet. She turned her head, squinting into the gloom. "Caleb?" Marcus took a step forward, the firelight finally catching his face. His beard was wild, his eyes sunken and manic, his clothes stained with salt and grime. He looked like a revenant rising from the grave. "Hello, Elena." Elena didn't scream. She didn't faint. She went rigid. Her hand instantly went to Leo, pulling the baby against her chest. She stood up slowly, backing away toward the kitchen counter. "Marcus," she whispered. Her voice wasn't fearful. It was filled with a profound, weary sadness. "How?" "You think you could hide my son from me?" Marcus rasped, his voice rough from disuse. "You steal my house, my money, my life, and you think I wouldn't come for him?" "I didn't steal anything," Elena said, her voice trembling slightly but gaining strength. I took what was legally mine. You signed the papers, Marcus. You broke the contract." "To hell with the contract," Marcus roared, stepping closer. "I am his father." "You're a stranger," Elena spat. "You haven't held him since he was 2 weeks old. You missed his first smile because you were working late with Jessica. You missed his first fever because you were at a casino. You aren't a father, Marcus. You're a donor." "Shut up!" Marcus lunged, grabbing a heavy iron poker from the fireplace tool set. He didn't want to use it, but he needed to feel powerful. "Give him to me. We're leaving." "Leaving?" Elena let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. "Look at you, Marcus. You're homeless. You're unhinged. Where are you going to take him? Under a bridge?" I have plans," Marcus stammered. "I'll rebuild. But I need my son." "You don't need a son," Elena said softly. "You need a possession. You need to win. That's all this is to you. A game you lost." "Give him to me." Marcus stepped within arm's reach. Leo, sensing the tension, began to wail. Elena clutched the baby tighter, turning her body to shield him. "No." Marcus reached out, his dirty hand grasping Elena's shoulder. "I said, give me the—" Suddenly, the front door exploded inward. It wasn't unlocked. It was kicked in. The wood splintered, sending shards flying across the room. Marcus spun around, raising the poker. Caleb stood in the doorway. He wasn't holding firewood anymore. He was holding a pump-action shotgun. The flashlight beam attached to the barrel blinded Marcus. "Drop it," Caleb ordered. His voice was calm, terrifyingly steady. Marcus hesitated. "This is my wife. This is my son." I said, "Drop it." Caleb racked the slide. Click-clack. The sound was universal. It cut through Marcus's rage and tapped directly into his survival instinct. The poker clattered to the floor. "Hands on your head. Knees. Now." Marcus slowly sank to his knees. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by the crushing exhaustion of the last 3 months. Elena exhaled, a long, shuddering breath. "It's okay, Leo. It's okay." Marcus looked up at the man holding the gun. "Who are you?" he snarled. "Her boyfriend? You think you can take my place?" Caleb kept the gun trained on Marcus's chest, but glanced at Eleanor. "Boyfriend? That's rich." Eleanor walked over to Caleb, placing a hand on his arm. "He doesn't know, Caleb. He never asked." Marcus looked between them. The eyes. They had the same eyes, the same shape of the nose. "He's not my boyfriend, Marcus," Elena said, looking down at her ex-husband with pity. "He's my brother." Marcus blinked. You don't have a brother. You said you were an only child." "I said I was estranged from my family," Elena corrected. "Because my father was an alcoholic and my mother was sick. Caleb was in the Marines. He was deployed for the first 3 years of our marriage. When he got back, you were too busy building your empire to care about meeting my white trash family. Remember? You told me not to invite them to the Christmas party because they wouldn't fit in." Marcus felt the memory hit him. He had said that. He had dismissed her entire history because it didn't fit his aesthetic. "Caleb has been living in the guest house for 2 months, Elena said, helping me fix this place up, protecting us. From you." Marcus slumped. The humiliation was total. He hadn't been replaced by a lover. He had been defeated by the family he was too arrogant to acknowledge. "The police are on their way," Caleb said. "Silent alarm. I triggered it from the shed when the lights went out." "No," Marcus whispered. "No police, please. Elena, don't do this." Elena looked at him. For a second, he saw the woman who used to love him, the woman who had straightened his tie before his first big pitch. "I'm not doing this, Marcus," she said quietly. "You did this. You drove here. You broke in. You threatened us. You wrote this ending yourself. The ride in the back of the sheriff's cruiser was a blur of flashing red and blue lights reflecting off the snow. Marcus watched the cabin disappear into the distance, a warm, glowing dot in a vast, cold darkness. He was charged with breaking and entering, stalking, and assault with a deadly weapon. Because he had crossed state lines to commit the crime, the federal authorities got involved. The legal hammer that Arthur Penhaligon had warned him about didn't just fall, it pulverized him. But the real twist, the final dagger in the heart of Marcus Sterling, didn't come in the courtroom. It came 3 weeks later in the county jail visitation room. Marcus sat behind the plexiglass, wearing an orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on his emaciated frame. He waited. He thought maybe Elena would come. Maybe she would offer a plea deal. Maybe she would let him see a picture of Leo. The door opened. It wasn't Elena. It was Arthur Penhaligon, his former lawyer, the man who had facilitated the destruction of his life. Arthur sat down, placing a sleek leather briefcase on the metal table. He looked older, tired. "Hello, Marcus," Arthur said. "You have some nerve coming here," Marcus spat. "Are you here to gloat?" "I'm here to close the file," Arthur said, opening the briefcase, "and to deliver a message. Elena didn't want to come. She thought it would be cruel." "Cruel? She ruined me." Arthur sighed, taking off his glasses and cleaning them. "Marcus, there is something you need to know. Something that wasn't relevant until you tried to claim custody." Arthur slid a document against the glass. It was a medical report. "What is this?" "2 years ago," Arthur began, "when you and Elena were trying to conceive, you went to a fertility clinic. You remember?" "Yeah. We did the tests. The doctor said we were fine." "The doctor told Eleanor she was fine," Arthur corrected. "He told you that you had a low count, but it was possible." "But that wasn't the whole truth." Marcus stared at the document. The medical jargon was dense, but the conclusion was clear. Diagnosis: azoospermia, sterile. The world stopped spinning. The hum of the fluorescent lights buzzed in his ears like a swarm of hornets. "Sterile," Marcus whispered. "No, that's impossible. Leo is my son." Arthur looked at him with a gaze that wasn't malicious, but deeply sorrowful. "Elena wanted a child more than anything. You were indifferent. You were busy. You were cheating. She knew the marriage was dying even then, but she wanted to save it. She thought a child would bring you back. Whose is it?" Marcus's voice broke. "Who is the father?" "An anonymous donor," Arthur said. "From the clinic. She did it to save your ego, Marcus. She knew if she told you that you couldn't give her a son, you would crumble. Your narcissism wouldn't handle it. So she underwent the procedure, got pregnant, and let you believe it was your miracle." Marcus sat frozen. The memories of the pregnancy flashed back. Elena's secretive doctor appointments, her vague answers, and when Leo was born, Marcus had bragged to everyone about the Sterling genes. "Look at that chin," he had said. "A true Sterling." It was all a lie constructed to protect his fragile masculinity. "She loved you enough to lie for you," Arthur said, putting the paper back. "She wanted a family with you, even if the biology wasn't yours. But then, you found Jessica. You started funneling money. You stopped coming home." Arthur stood up. "Leo isn't your son, Marcus. Not biologically. And after what you did at the cabin, he never will be legally. The judge granted the permanent restraining order this morning, and since you have no biological claim, your parental rights have been terminated. 0%. Marcus couldn't breathe. It felt like his lungs had turned to glass and shattered. Why? Why tell me now? Marcus asked, tears streaming down his face. Why not just let me rot thinking he was mine? Because, Arthur said, pausing at the door. Elena wanted you to know that you didn't lose your son because of the divorce. You never had him. You lost the privilege of being his father, and that was a choice you made every single day you chose yourself over them. Arthur knocked on the door for the guard. Goodbye, Marcus. The door closed. Marcus Sterling sat alone in the sterile grey room. He looked at his hands, the hands that had built skyscrapers, the hands that had signed the checks for the Mistress, the hands that had held a poker to his wife's face. He had chased a ghost across the country. He had fought a war for a legacy that didn't exist. He closed his eyes. In the darkness of his mind, he saw the sold sign on the lawn one last time. He realized now that the house wasn't the only thing that had been sold. He had sold his soul, piece by piece, for years. And now, the bill had finally come due. He put his head in his hands, and for the first time in his life, he didn't scream. He didn't rage. He simply sat in the silence he had built, brick by brick. Marcus Sterling spent the next 5 years in a federal correctional facility. He never saw Elena or Leo again. Elena remarried. A quiet man. A local teacher in Maine who taught Leo how to fish and how to treat a woman with respect. It's a brutal lesson, but a necessary one. A house is made of walls and beams, but a home is built on trust. Marcus thought he was the architect of his life, but he forgot the most important rule of construction. If the foundation is built on lies, the collapse is inevitable. And sometimes, the people we think are weak are just holding up the weight of our secrets until they finally decide to let go. What do you think? Did Marcus deserve to lose everything, or was Eleanor's secret about the baby too cruel? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of justice and karma, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video. Have you ever watched a man dig his own grave with a smile on his face? There is a specific kind of silence that falls over a room when a husband walks into his 10th wedding anniversary party, with his arm around a woman who isn't his wife. Julian Thorne thought he was the smartest man in New York City. He thought his wife, Lakota, was just a trophy, a quiet, naive woman who stayed at home while he built his empire. But Julian made one fatal calculation error that night. He didn't know that the luxury hotel he was standing in, the staff serving his champagne, and the security guards watching his every move, all belonged to her. This is the story of how Lakota Thorne turned an anniversary dinner into a public execution. The air inside the grand ballroom of the Stratford Regency smelled of white lilies and impending ruin. Lakota Thorne stood in the center of the room, her silhouette framed by the towering floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the rainy expanse of Manhattan. At 34, Lakota possessed a beauty that was often described as statuesque, cold, immovable, and undeniably expensive. She wore a gown of emerald silk that draped over her frame like liquid armor, the back plunging low to reveal a spine that had never bent for anyone, though her husband, Julian, liked to believe otherwise. She adjusted a single crystal flute on the head table, rotating it 2 degrees to the right. Perfect. Mrs. Thorne? The voice echoed in the cavernous, empty hall. Lakota didn't flinch. She turned slowly to see Marcus Sterling, the general manager of the hotel, walking toward her. Marcus was a man of 50, with silver fox hair and a suit that cost more than most people's cars. He was also the only person in the world who knew the truth about today. "Is everything in place, Marcus?" Lakota asked, her voice smooth, betraying not a tremor of the anxiety that should have been consuming a woman about to blow up her life. "The security team has been briefed," Marcus said, stopping a respectful distance away. He held a tablet against his chest. "The new deed transfer was finalized at 4:00 p.m. today. The legal team at Halloway and Finch confirmed it. You are officially the sole proprietor of the Stratford Regency and its 3 sister locations in London, Paris, and Tokyo." Lakota allowed a ghost of a smile to touch her lips. "And Julian? Does he have any idea?" "None," Marcus replied, his tone clipped. "Mr. Thorne still believes he secured the ballroom tonight through a friend of a friend discount. He believes the owner is still the chaotic conglomerate Vanguard Holdings. He has no idea the acquisition took place." "Good." Lakota walked over to the window, looking down at the street where limousines were beginning to circle like sharks. Julian Thorne, her husband of 10 years, the charismatic architect who had charmed the pants off New York's elite, and more recently, the pants off a 23-year-old interior design intern named Bella Sinclair. For the last 6 months, Lakota had played the part of the oblivious wife perfectly. She had smiled when he came home, late smelling of Chanel Chance, a perfume she never wore. She had nodded sympathetically when he claimed site inspections kept him out until 3 a.m. on Tuesdays. She had even signed the papers he slid across the breakfast table, documents he claimed were for tax purposes, but were actually attempts to move her inheritance into joint accounts. He thought she was stupid. He thought she was just the daughter of old money who didn't understand the complexities of finance. He didn't know that Lakota had hired a private investigator, Tobias Reed, 4 months ago. He didn't know that Tobias had provided 4K video footage of Julian and Bella at a resort in the Hamptons, and he certainly didn't know that Lakota had used her own inheritance, money Julian was desperate to get his hands on, to buy the very ground he was about to stand on. He requested a specific seating arrangement, Marcus noted, glancing at his tablet. He wants the intern, Miss Sinclair, seated at the main table. He listed her as executive assistant to the honoree. Lakota laughed, a dry, brittle sound. "The audacity is almost impressive, isn't it? He's bringing his mistress to his own anniversary party and sitting her next to his wife. He wants to flaunt her in my face while I smile and cut the cake." "He believes you are too polite to make a scene," Marcus said. "He relies on your dignity, Lakota." "He's right. I won't make a scene," Lakota said, turning back to the empty ballroom. Her eyes were hard as diamonds. "I'm going to make an example." She ran a hand over the velvet tablecloth. "Marcus, ensure the staff knows the protocol. When Julian orders the vintage Dom Perignon, I want the 1996 bottles brought out, the ones that cost $12,000 a pop." "He won't want to pay for those," Marcus warned. "He specifically asked for the house sparkling wine to be poured into premium bottles to save money." "I know," Lakota said softly. "But the owner of the hotel insists on the best for her guests, and since the bill will be presented to him publicly at the end of the night, let's make it a bill worth remembering." The doors at the far end of the hall opened. The first guests were arriving. Lakota took a deep breath, pulling the mask of the dutiful wife back over her face. The stage was set, the trap was baited, and the rat was walking right in. The lobby of the Stratford Regency was a masterpiece of Art Deco design. Gold leaf ceilings, black marble floors, and a chandelier that looked like a weeping willow made of diamonds. It was the kind of place that made you whisper. But Julian Thorne didn't whisper. He broadcasted. He swept through the revolving doors with the energy of a man who believed the world was a movie directed by him. He was handsome, objectively so, tall, with a jawline that could cut glass and hair that was perfectly coiffed. He wore a tuxedo that fit him like a second skin, a midnight blue that distinguished him from the sea of black-clad waiters. On his arm was not his wife. It was Bella Sinclair. She was stunning, in a way that was meant to be noticed. She wore a dress of crimson red, a deliberate, aggressive clash against the elegant, muted tones of the hotel. It was tight, revealing, and screamed for attention. She clung to Julian's bicep, her eyes darting around the lobby with a mixture of awe and entitlement. "Julian, this place is insane," Bella giggled, her voice carrying over the soft jazz playing in the background. "You really rented the whole ballroom? For us?" "Of course," Julian said, patting her hand. He didn't say for my anniversary. He just said, "For us." "I know people, babe. The owner owes me a favor. We practically got this place for free." He checked his reflection in a brass pillar, adjusting his bow tie. He looked at himself with genuine affection. He was the picture of success. His architectural firm was struggling, his debts were mounting, and he was leveraging assets he didn't technically own. But nobody here knew that. Tonight was about cementing his image. "Now, remember," Julian whispered, leaning close to Bella's ear. "When we go up there, we have to be professional. You're my executive assistant. Lakota is... well, she's fragile. We don't want to upset her." Bella rolled her eyes playfully. "I know the drill, Julian. The boring wife gets the title, I get the fun. But..." She traced a finger down his lapel. "When do you tell her?" "You promised. After the anniversary, you ask for the divorce." "Tonight?" Julian lied smoothly. "I'm going to lay the groundwork tonight. Once I secure the investors at this party, I'll have the capital to buy her out. Then, it's just you and me." He believed it as he said it. That was Julian's superpower. He believed his own lies. They approached the grand staircase leading to the ballroom. At the top of the stairs, standing like a sentinel, was Marcus. Julian flashed his brightest, most winning smile. "Marcus, good to see you, old man. Everything ready?" Marcus looked down at Julian. His face was a mask of professional indifference, but his eyes were cold. "Mr. Thorne, your guests are already being seated. Mrs. Thorne is waiting for you at the head table." Marcus's gaze slid to Bella. He didn't blink. "And I see you've brought additional staff." Julian's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "Ah, yes. This is Miss Sinclair, my top assistant, essential for networking tonight. Put her next to me." "As you wish," Marcus said. "Although, I must inform you, there has been a slight change in the hotel's management policy regarding billing. All incidentals must be settled upon conclusion of the event." "Fine, fine," Julian waved him off, annoyed by the mundane details. "Just put it on the corporate tab. Let's go, Bella." Julian led Bella up the stairs, feeling the rush of adrenaline. He loved the danger. He loved the thrill of walking his mistress right past the hotel staff, right toward his wife. It made him feel powerful. It made him feel like a king. They entered the ballroom. The room fell silent for a heartbeat. 200 of New York's social elite turned to look. They saw Julian, the golden boy, and they saw the woman in the red dress clinging to him. Whispers started instantly. It sounded like the buzzing of 1,000 angry bees. "Who is that? That's not Lakota. Is that the intern? At his anniversary?" Julian ignored them. He spotted Lakota at the head table. She was standing with her back to the window, the city lights creating a halo around her. She looked regal, distant. He walked up to her, decoupling his arm from Bella's just before he reached the table. "Lakota, darling, Julian said, leaning in to kiss her cheek. He smelled of scotch and audacity. You look appropriate. Lakota didn't pull away, but she didn't lean in. She let his lips graze her cheek, her skin cool to the touch. She looked at him. Then her eyes shifted slowly to Bella, who was standing awkwardly a few feet away. Julian, Lakota said. Her voice was low, audible only to him and Bella. I see you brought work home with you. Emergency briefing, Julian said quickly, flashing a grin that usually worked on everyone. Bella has the files for the monolithic project. I figured she could grab a plate while we discuss the renderings with the investors. Bella stepped forward, extending a hand. Her nails were painted the exact same shade of red as her dress. Happy anniversary, Mrs. Thorne. Julian talks about you, occasionally. It was a dig, a sharp, petty little knife twist. Lakota looked at the extended hand. She didn't take it. Instead, she picked up her glass of water, took a sip, and set it down. Miss Sinclair, Lakota said, her voice devoid of emotion. You're wearing red. How brave. I usually reserve that color for the staff uniforms during the holidays. Bella's face flushed pink. Julian stiffened. Lakota? Be nice, Julian hissed under his breath. She's here to help me secure our future. Of course, Lakota said, finally smiling. It was a terrifying smile. It didn't reach her eyes. Please, sit down. I wouldn't want you to miss the show. I have a feeling tonight is going to be very educational for everyone involved. She gestured to the seats. Julian sat at the head of the table, placing Bella to his right. Lakota sat to his left. The dynamic was set. The husband, the wife, and the mistress breaking bread together in front of 200 witnesses. A waiter approached. A young man named Tobias, the very private investigator Lakota had hired months ago, now undercover in a waiter's uniform to gather final audio evidence. Champagne, sir? Tobias asked, holding a bottle of the 1996 Dom Perignon. Yes, pour it, Julian said, not looking at the label. And keep it coming. We have a lot to celebrate. We certainly do, Lakota murmured. Watching the golden liquid fill her glass, she raised it slightly, catching Marcus's eye across the room. Marcus gave a barely perceptible nod. He tapped his earpiece. The doors to the ballroom were closed and locked. The trap was sealed. The first course was a lobster bisque with a cognac reduction, served in porcelain bowls that cost more than Bella Sinclair's monthly rent. The ballroom was alive with the low hum of conversation, the clinking of silverware, and the performative laughter of the wealthy. At the head table, however, the air was thick enough to choke on. Julian Thorne was in his element, or at least he thought he was. He leaned back in his chair, one arm draped over the back of Bella's seat, a gesture so casual yet possessive that it made the wife of Senator Harrison, seated across from them, raise a perfectly manicured eyebrow. You see, Senator, Julian said, gesturing broadly with a breadstick, architecture isn't just about buildings, it's about legacy. It's about leaving a mark on the skyline that says, I was here. That's what I'm doing with the Skyline project. We break ground next month. Is that so? Senator Harrison asked, his tone dry. He glanced at Lakota. I was under the impression that financing was still pending. Mere formalities, Julian waved a hand dismissively. The banks are lining up. Actually, Bella here has been instrumental in organizing the pitch decks. She's got a real eye for aesthetics. Bella beamed, interpreting this as her cue to speak. She had already finished 2 glasses of the Dom Perignon and was feeling loose. Oh, absolutely. Julian is a genius. I just help him unlock his potential. You know, sometimes men just need a muse to really get the creative juices flowing. She placed a hand on Julian's thigh under the table. She thought she was being subtle. She wasn't. Lakota saw it. The senator saw it. The waiters saw it. Lakota sliced her bread with surgical precision. "Amuse," she repeated, the word tasting like ash. Interesting choice of words, Miss Sinclair. In Greek mythology, the Muses were often tragic figures. They inspired great works, usually before being discarded when the artist moved on to the next shiny thing. Bella's smile faltered. "I think you're confusing them with someone else. I'm more of a partner." "A partner," Lakota mused, looking directly at Julian. "Julian, are we taking on new partners? I thought the firm was a sole proprietorship." Julian stiffened. He hated when Lakota talked business. He preferred her silent and decorative. "It's a figure of speech, Lakota. Don't be pedantic. You're boring the senator." "On the contrary," Senator Harrison said, looking at Lakota with newfound interest. "Mrs. Thorne seems to have a very sharp grasp of the situation." At that moment, the sommelier arrived. He was a tall, severe Frenchman named Jean-Luc, who had worked at the Stratford Regency for 20 years. He held a bottle of red wine, a 1982 Chateau Margaux, cradled like a newborn baby. Julian's eyes lit up. "Ah, the red. Finally. Pour it here, my good man." He tapped his glass impatiently. Jean-Luc didn't move. He stood perfectly still, his eyes fixed somewhere above Julian's hairline. "Monsieur," Jean-Luc said, his accent thick and unyielding. "I'm afraid there is a misunderstanding. This bottle is not for you." Julian blinked. The table went quiet. "Excuse me? I ordered the best red you have. That looks like the best." "It is the best, monsieur," Jean-Luc replied smoothly. "But this vintage is reserved specifically for the owner of the hotel. It is not on the public menu." Julian laughed, a nervous barking sound. "Well, I'm sure the owner won't mind. I'm Julian Thorne. I'm practically VIP here tonight. Just pour the damn wine." Jean-Luc turned his back on Julian. He walked around the table, stopping to the left of the head chair. He bowed slightly, a bow of genuine respect, not servitude, and presented the label to Lakota. "Madame," Jean-Luc said softly, "the 1982 Margaux, as requested. Shall I decant it now?" The table watched in stunned silence. Julian's mouth hung open. Bella looked confused, glancing between the waiter and Lakota. "Thank you, Jean-Luc," Lakota said, her voice calm and authoritative. "Please pour a glass for the senator as well. I think he would appreciate the notes of tobacco and truffle." "But not for my husband," she added, her eyes locking with Julian's. "Julian prefers something younger, less complex. Perhaps bring him the House Merlot, the 2023 blend." Julian's face turned a violent shade of red. "Lakota!" he hissed. "What are you doing? You're embarrassing me." "Am I?" Lakota asked innocently. "I thought you liked the younger vintages, Julian. Isn't that why Miss Sinclair is sitting at our table?" The insult landed with the force of a physical slap. Bella gasped, dropping her fork. The clatter echoed in the silence of the immediate vicinity. "That was uncalled for," Julian snapped, leaning in aggressively. "You're drunk." "I haven't had a drop, Julian," Lakota said, finally allowing the ice in her eyes to crack, revealing the fire beneath. "I am the only person at this table who is completely, utterly sober." She turned to Marcus, the general manager, who had materialized out of the shadows the moment Julian raised his voice. "Marcus," Lakota said, "Mr. Thorne seems unhappy with the wine service." "I can have security escort him to the bar if he needs to cool off," Marcus said instantly. His tone wasn't a suggestion, it was a threat. Julian looked at Marcus, then at the security guard standing 10 feet away, hand hovering near his belt. He felt a sudden, inexplicable chill. He was used to being the loudest man in the room, the one who commanded attention. But tonight, the room felt hostile. The very walls seemed to be closing in on him. "No," Julian muttered, straightening his jacket. "It's fine. I'll drink the water." "Wise choice," Lakota said. She took a sip of the Chateau Margaux. It tasted like victory. The main course arrived, filet mignon with truffle butter. As the waiters placed the plates, Lakota noticed a subtle detail she had arranged earlier. Everyone's plate was garnished with an intricate carving of a vegetable flower. Everyone, that is, except Bella's. Bella's plate had a small, handwritten note tucked under the steak knife. Bella frowned, pulling the note out. She read it, her brow furrowing. "What does it say?" Julian asked, whispering. "It's a receipt," Bella whispered back, confused. "It says, dry cleaning, lipstick removal from collar of grey Armani suit. Date, October 14th. Cost, $45 gross." Julian froze. He owned a grey Armani suit, and on October 14th, he had told Lakota he was at a conference in Chicago. Lakota sliced her steak. "Is something wrong with your meal, Miss Sinclair?" "No," Bella stammered, shoving the note into her purse. She looked at Julian with wide, panicked eyes. "Nothing." "Good," Lakota said. "Eat up. You'll need your strength. The speeches are next." Julian lost his appetite. He looked at his wife, really looked at her, for the first time in years. He saw the sharpness of her jaw, the terrifying calmness of her hands. He felt a prickle of fear, a primal instinct warning him that he was the prey in the tall grass. But his arrogance was a powerful drug. "She knows about the affair," he thought. "That's all this is. She's jealous. She's acting out. I can fix this. I'll charm the room during the speech, remind everyone who the breadwinner is, and then I'll deal with her later." He didn't realize that later was a luxury he could no longer afford. The lights dimmed. The chatter in the ballroom subsided as a spotlight hit the small stage set up near the head table. Marcus walked to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, family and friends, welcome to the Stratford Regency. We are gathered here to celebrate 10 years of marriage between Julian and Lakota Thorne, a decade of partnership." He paused on the word partnership with a dryness that suggested it was a legal term rather than a romantic one. "Please welcome," Marcus continued, "Mr. Julian Thorne." Applause rippled through the room. It was polite, dutiful. Julian stood up, buttoning his jacket. He squeezed Bella's shoulder, a reassurance for her, or perhaps himself, and walked to the stage. He took the microphone, flashing his signature grin. It was the grin that had sold shaky investment plans to half the people in the room. Thank you," Julian began, his voice booming. 10 years, a decade. They say marriage is a marathon, not a sprint. And let me tell you, I've been running hard." A few chuckles from his boys at table 5. "When I met Lakota," Julian continued, glancing back at the table where his wife sat like a stone statue. She was a shy girl. She didn't know much about the world. I like to think I've helped her grow. I've built a life for us. I've built a company from the ground up, the Thorne Architecture Group, which is about to change the face of New York. He paused for effect. But behind every great man there is a woman who keeps the home fires burning. Lakota, thank you for managing the house while I was out conquering the world." It was a condescending, dismissive speech. He was erasing her. He was painting himself as the titan and her as the domestic accessory. "And," Julian added, his eyes drifting to Bella, "I want to thank my incredible team, specifically my executive assistant, Bella Sinclair." "Stand up, Bella." The room went deadly silent. Bella hesitated, then stood up slowly. Her red dress was a beacon of impropriety. She gave a small, awkward wave. "Bella has been my right hand," Julian said, oblivious to the tension. "She's the future of the firm. Here's to the next 10 years, to growth, to Thorn architecture." He raised his glass. About a third of the room raised theirs. The rest looked at their shoes. Julian walked back to the table, beaming. He sat down and whispered to Lakota, "See, that's how you handle a room." Lakota didn't look at him. She simply stood up. She didn't wait for an introduction. She didn't wait for the applause to die down. She walked to the microphone with a grace that was almost predatory. She adjusted the stand, as it was set too high for her. Julian had never considered her height. "Thank you, Julian," Lakota said. Her voice was different now. It wasn't the soft, submissive voice of the housewife. It was lower, richer. It commanded the room instantly. Julian spoke about the last 10 years. Lakota began, looking out at the crowd. He spoke about building things, about legacy, and it got me thinking about the nature of construction. You see, to build something that lasts, you need a solid foundation. If the foundation is rotten, no matter how beautiful the facade is, the structure will collapse. She looked back at Julian. He was frowning, a glass of water halfway to his lips. Julian mentioned his firm, Lakota continued. He mentioned his hard work. But there are some things Julian forgot to mention. Details. And as we all know, the devil is in the details. She reached into the podium and pulled out a small remote control. "I prepared a little slide show," she said, "a retrospective of our decade together." She clicked the button. The massive projection screen behind her flickered to life. The first image wasn't a wedding photo. It was a bank statement. A collective gasp went through the room. It was a projected image of a joint account at Chase Bank. The balance was highlighted in red, $450,000. "This," Lakota said calmly, "is the current state of the Thorn Architecture Group." Julian choked on his water. He scrambled to his feet. "Lakota, what the hell is this? Turn it off." "Sit down, Julian," Lakota said. She didn't shout. She spoke into the microphone, her voice booming over his. "We are celebrating, and part of celebrating is being honest." "I said turn it off!" Julian lunged toward the stage. 2 large men in black suits, security guards who had been waiting in the wings, stepped out and blocked his path. They didn't touch him, but their presence was a wall of muscle. "Please return to your seat, Mr. Thorn," one of them said. Julian looked around wildly. "This is insane! Marcus, get these goons off me. This is my party." Marcus stepped forward from the shadows, his face grim. "Actually, Mr. Thorn, per the contract signed by the venue owner, the microphone belongs to her." Julian froze. "What?" Lakota clicked the remote again. The screen changed. It was a screenshot of a credit card bill. "This is the corporate American Express," Lakota narrated, like a professor giving a lecture. "May 12th, the Four Seasons Maui, a business trip for the Skyline project." She clicked again. A photo appeared. It was high resolution. It showed Julian and Bella Sinclair sunbathing on a private balcony in Maui. Julian was applying sunscreen to Bella's back. The room erupted. The whispers turned into shouts. People were standing up to get a better look. Bella Sinclair shrieked. She covered her face with her hands, sinking low in her chair. "As you can see," Lakota said, her voice cutting through the noise, "the Skyline project looks remarkably like a 23-year-old intern." "You boo!" Julian screamed, his facade completely shattering. He pointed a shaking finger at her. "You hacked my accounts. This is illegal. I'll sue you for everything you have." "Sue me?" Lakota laughed. It was a dark, amused sound. "With what money, Julian? You spent it all." She clicked the remote one more time. The screen changed to a legal document, a deed of trust. "You see," Lakota said, stepping out from behind the podium, walking to the edge of the stage so she loomed over her husband. "You always told me not to worry my pretty little head about finances. You told me to just stay home and spend my inheritance. So, I did." She gestured to the ballroom, to the crystal chandeliers, to the waiters lining the walls, to the very floor Julian was standing on. "I spent my inheritance, Julian. I bought Vanguard Holdings." Julian stared at her, his brain trying to process the information. Vanguard. But Vanguard Holdings owned this hotel, Lakota explained slowly, as if talking to a child. "Which means, Julian, I own this hotel. I own the chairs you are sitting on. I own the champagne you just drank. I own the security guards standing behind you." She leaned forward, her eyes burning into his. "And most importantly, I own the debt your company owes to this venue, which is currently $150,000, and I am calling in the debt. Tonight." Julian's face went white. He looked at Bella, who was sobbing. He looked at the investors, who were looking at him with disgust. He looked at Lakota, and he realized, with a sickening lurch of his stomach, that the trap hadn't just sprung. It had decapitated him. "Now," Lakota said, turning to the security guards, "I believe Mr. Thorne and his executive assistant have a bill to settle before they are escorted off the premises." "Wait," Julian stammered, holding up his hands. "Lakota, baby, listen. It's not what it looks like. We can talk about this. We're married." "Are we?" Lakota signaled to the back of the room. The double doors swung open. A woman in a sharp grey suit walked in. She was carrying a briefcase. "Who is that?" Julian whispered, trembling. "That," Lakota said, "is my divorce attorney, Evelyn Price, and she has some paperwork for you to sign. Right now, in front of all these witnesses." The room held its breath. The drama was far from over. Julian Thorne was a cornered rat, and cornered rats tend to bite. Evelyn Price moved through the ballroom like a shark cutting through water. She was a woman who didn't just know the law, she weaponized it. She placed the leather briefcase on the table, right next to the untouched Chateau Margaux, the snap of the latches echoing like gunshots in the silent room. "Mr. Thorne," Evelyn said, her voice crisp, "I suggest you read these documents carefully. Although, knowing your history with contracts, reading isn't exactly your strong suit." Julian stared at the papers. His hands were shaking so badly he had to grip the edge of the table to steady them. He looked up, his eyes darting to the crowd. He saw the faces of his peers, his investors, his friends. They weren't looking at him with pity. They were looking at him with the morbid curiosity of drivers slowing down to watch a car wreck. "I'm not signing anything," Julian spat, trying to summon a shred of his former bravado. He turned to Lakota. "You think you can ambush me? This is an anniversary party, Lakota. We are married. In the state of New York, that means equitable distribution. Half of what's mine is yours, and half of what's yours is mine." He pointed a finger at the floor. "That includes this hotel. If you bought it while we were married, it's a marital asset. I own half of this building." A ripple of murmurs went through the crowd. Is he right? Does he own half? Lakota didn't flinch. She picked up the bottle of wine, pouring herself another glass with agonizing slowness. "Evelyn," Lakota said softly, "please educate my husband on the timeline of events." Evelyn pulled a single sheet of paper from the stack. "Mr. Thorne, do you recall the documents you signed 3 months ago? The ones you told Mrs. Thorne were for tax optimization regarding her family trust?" Julian frowned, sweat beading on his forehead. "Yeah. So what?" That was just to move some money around to lower our bracket. Not quite, Evelyn smiled, a predator baring teeth. That document was a post-nuptial agreement. In it, you explicitly waived all rights to any assets acquired by Mrs. Thorne, using funds from the Vanderhoven Family Trust. You also agreed that any debt incurred by Thorne Architecture Group would remain the sole liability of Julian Thorne. Julian's face went slack. No, I didn't read. You thought she was stupid, Evelyn finished for him. You thought you were tricking her into signing over control of her trust. In reality, you signed away your claim to everything she was about to buy, including the Stratford Regency. The realization hit Julian like a physical blow. He staggered back, knocking into his chair. And, Evelyn continued, twisting the knife, there is an infidelity clause, a rather robust one. In the event of proven adultery, which I believe the slideshow has sufficiently demonstrated, you forfeit any claim to spousal support. You leave with what you came with. Lakota looked at him over the rim of her glass. And considering you came here tonight in a tuxedo you rented, and a limousine you billed to a company that is currently bankrupt, I'd say you're leaving with nothing. Beside him, Bella Sinclair made a noise that sounded like a strangled cat. She stood up, her red dress suddenly looking cheap under the harsh ballroom lights. I have to go, Bella stammered. She grabbed her purse. Julian, I can't be here for this. This is too much drama. She turned to flee, her heels clicking rapidly on the parquet floor. Miss Sinclair! Marcus's voice boomed across the room. Bella froze near the exit. 2 security guards stepped in front of the doors, arms crossed. I'm afraid you cannot leave just yet, Marcus said, walking toward her with a silver tray in his hand. On the tray was a folded piece of heavy cardstock. What is this? Bella cried, her voice rising to a panic. Am I being kidnapped? I'll call the police. Please do, Marcus said calmly. But first we must settle the bill. Mr. Thorne's credit card was declined 10 minutes ago. Since you are listed as the executive assistant and the secondary contact for the event booking, and since you have consumed... Let's see. Marcus opened the bill. 3 bottles of Dom Perignon, the lobster bisque, the filet mignon, and a significant amount of the hotel's oxygen. The total comes to $12,400. Bella's jaw dropped. I don't have that kind of money. I'm an intern. An intern wearing Louboutins, Lakota noted from the head table, her voice carrying clearly. Perhaps Julian can help you? Oh, wait. That's right. Bella whipped around to face Julian. The adoration in her eyes had vanished, replaced by pure, unadulterated venom. You said you were rich, she shrieked, pointing a manicured finger at him. You said she was a boring housewife who didn't know how to spend money. You said you owned the city. Bella, baby, calm down, Julian pleaded, holding his hands up. It's a temporary cash flow problem. I can fix this. I just need to make a few calls. You're a fraud, Bella screamed. She reached into her purse and pulled out a diamond bracelet he had given her. She threw it at him. It bounced off his chest and clattered onto the floor. Take your fake jewelry back. Actually, Lakota interjected smoothly, that bracelet is real. He bought it with the down payment for the Riverside Orphanage project, which, coincidentally, never broke ground. The room gasped again. Senator Harrison, who had been watching the proceedings with a face like thunder, stood up. Julian, the senator barked. His voice was the kind that commanded Senate floors. Is that true? The Riverside funds? That was a municipal grant. Julian looked at the senator, terror in his eyes. Senator, listen. Funds are fungible. It's all part of the liquidity cycle. You stole money from orphans to buy your mistress diamonds? Senator Harrison asked, his voice shaking with rage. "I'm pulling the endorsement, and I'm calling the district attorney." "No! Senator, wait!" Julian lunged toward the senator, desperate to stop the one man who could shield him. "Restrain him!" Marcus ordered. The security guards moved in. Julian swung wildly, his fist connecting with the shoulder of a guard. It was a mistake. Within seconds, Julian Thorne, the man who thought he was a king, was pinned face down on the table, his cheek pressed into the remains of his lobster bisque. Lakota stood up slowly. She walked over to where her husband lay, pinned amongst the silverware. She looked down at him, her expression one of mild distaste, as if she were looking at a stain on the carpet. "Get him up," she said. The guards hauled Julian to his feet. His bow tie was crooked, his suit was stained with soup, and his hair was a mess. He looked broken. "Lakota," he wheezed, "please don't do this. I'm your husband." "You were my husband," Lakota corrected. "Now you're just a trespasser." She turned to Marcus. "Marcus, throw them out. Both of them." "Wait," a voice called out from the side of the room. "Not just yet." It was Tobias, the waiter. He had removed his white serving jacket, revealing a badge clipped to his belt. He walked toward the head table, pulling a pair of handcuffs from his back pocket. The drama had just shifted from civil to criminal. The silence that fell over the ballroom was absolute. Even the breathing of the guests seemed to stop. Julian stared at the badge on Tobias's belt. It wasn't a private investigator's badge. It was federal. "Tobias Reed," the man said, his voice calm and professional. "FBI, White Collar, Crimes Division." Julian's knees buckled. The security guards had to hold him up. "FBI, for a divorce. This is entrapment." "This isn't about the divorce, Mr. Thorne," Tobias said, stepping closer. "Although Mrs. Thorne's cooperation was instrumental in our investigation, this is about the Skyline Project, and the Riverside Orphanage, and the $3 million in investor funds that you wired to offshore accounts in the Caymans." Tobias looked at Bella. "And Miss Sinclair? You're listed as the signatory on 2 of those shell companies. Sinclair Consulting, I believe?" Bella let out a high-pitched whimper. I just signed what he told me to sign. He said it was for tax purposes. I didn't know." "Ignorance is a defense you can argue in court," Tobias said, unclipping the handcuffs. "Julian Thorne, you are under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering." The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut around Julian's wrists was loud in the cavernous room. Click, click. The flashbulbs started going off. The guests had lost their inhibitions. Phones were out, recording every second. This was the social death of Julian Thorne, broadcast live to Instagram and TikTok. Julian looked around, his eyes wild and wet with tears. "Lakota, help me! You can't let them take me. I'm the father of your... We could have had children." "We didn't," Lakota said coldly. "And thank God for that. I wouldn't want to explain to a child why their father is in federal prison." "I'll rot in there," Julian screamed as Tobias began to lead him away. "I'll lose everything." "You already have," Lakota said. She signaled to Marcus. "Marcus, the music, please." Marcus nodded to the band. The conductor, a confused but professional man, raised his baton. The band struck up a lively, upbeat jazz number. "Hit the Road Jack." A few nervous titters of laughter rippled through the crowd, then more genuine laughter. The tension broke. As Julian was dragged toward the exit, dragging his feet like a petulant child, he passed Bella. "You did this!" Julian screamed at her. "You and your expensive tastes!" "Me!" Bella screamed back, as a female officer who had entered with Tobias took her arm. "You used me! You said you were leaving her!" "I should have left you at the bar where I found you." They were bickering, screaming accusations at each other as they were hauled out of the double doors. The doors swung shut, cutting off their voices. The room was left with the upbeat jazz and the stunned guests. Lakota stood alone at the head table. She picked up the microphone one last time. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said. Her voice was steady, but there was a tremor of exhaustion in it. "I apologize for the interruption to your dinner. The main course has been cleared, but dessert will be served shortly. It is a dark chocolate ganache with a bitter orange glaze." She paused, looking out at the sea of faces. The people who had whispered about her, who had pitied her, who had underestimated her. "I invite you all to stay," she said. "Enjoy the hospitality of the Stratford Regency. Tonight the drinks are on the house. Consider it a celebration of new beginnings." She placed the microphone down. Senator Harrison was the first to clap. It was a slow, respectful clap. Then his wife joined in. Then the table next to them. Within seconds, the entire room was giving Lakota Thorne a standing ovation. She didn't bow. She didn't smile. She simply nodded, acknowledged Marcus, and walked off the stage. She exited the ballroom through a side door, leaving the noise of the party behind. She walked down a quiet service corridor, her heels clicking on the linoleum. She found herself in the hotel kitchen. The staff froze as she entered. The chefs stopped chopping. The dishwashers stopped spraying. They knew who she was now. She wasn't just the lady in the green dress. She was the boss. Lakota walked over to a stainless steel counter where a young pastry chef was plating the desserts. She looked at the chocolate creation. "It looks beautiful," Lakota said. "Thank you, madame," the chef stammered. "What is your name?" "Leo, madame." "Leo," Lakota said, taking a deep breath. "Make sure everyone gets a slice, and send a bottle of the 1982 Margot to the staff break room. You all handled the service impeccably tonight under difficult circumstances." "Yes, madame. Thank you, madame." Lakota turned and walked toward the freight elevator. She didn't want to go back to the penthouse yet. She didn't want to go back to the empty house in the suburbs. She pressed the button for the roof. The elevator rattled upward. When the doors opened, the cold night air hit her face. It was raining, a soft, cleansing drizzle. Lakota walked to the edge of the roof, looking out over the glittering skyline of Manhattan. She saw the construction cranes, the streams of traffic, the endless lights. She reached into her clutch and pulled out her wedding ring. It was a large diamond, flashy and ostentatious, exactly the kind of ring Julian had wanted her to wear so people would know he was successful. She looked at it for a long moment. She didn't feel sad. She didn't feel angry. She felt light. She didn't throw the ring off the roof. That would be dramatic, and she was done with drama. It would also be wasteful, and she was a businesswoman now. She put the ring back in her purse. "I'll sell it," she thought, "and I'll donate the money to the actual Riverside orphanage." Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Evelyn. Message: "He's in custody. Bail denied. Bella is cooperating for a plea deal. It's over, Elle. You're free." Lakota typed back, "Thank you." She put the phone away and looked at the city. She owned a hotel. She had rid herself of a parasitic husband. She had her dignity. But there was one loose end. One final twist that even Julian hadn't seen coming. She turned away from the ledge and walked back to the elevator. Waiting for her there was a man. He wasn't a waiter. He wasn't a lawyer. It was Marcus. But he wasn't wearing his manager's uniform. He was wearing a trench coat, holding an umbrella. "Did he suspect anything?" Marcus asked quietly. "About the ownership?" "No," Lakota said. "And about us?" Marcus asked. Lakota smiled. It was the first genuine smile she had worn all night. It reached her eyes, softening the hard lines of her face. "Julian was so busy looking at himself, Marcus," she said. stepping under the umbrella he held out for her. He never noticed that his wife and his general manager have been meeting for coffee every Tuesday for the last 2 years. Coffee, Marcus chuckled, and strategy. Mostly strategy, Lakota admitted. But I think, starting tomorrow, we can stop talking about Julian Thorne. Agreed, Marcus said. He pressed the button for the lobby. Where to, boss? Home, Lakota said. I have a company to run in the morning. As the elevator doors closed, shutting out the rain and the city, Lakota Thorne finally relaxed. The anniversary was over. The marriage was dead. Long live the Queen. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is exactly what happens when you mistake silence for weakness. Julian Thorne walked into that ballroom thinking he was the king of the castle, completely unaware that he was standing on a trapdoor that his wife had spent months building. It wasn't just a divorce, it was a corporate dismantling. Lakota didn't just take his money, she took his pride, his reputation, and his freedom, all without ever raising her voice above a conversational volume. What makes this story so satisfying isn't just the money or the hotel ownership. It's the patience. Think about the discipline it took for Lakota to sit there for months, watching him lie, watching him drag his mistress around town, all while she secretly held the deed to his entire existence. She gave him enough rope to hang himself, and he did it with a smile on his face. It's a brutal reminder that the most dangerous person in the room is never the loudest one. It's the one who knows everything and says nothing until the check comes due. And that final twist with Marcus? It proves that Lakota wasn't just reacting to a bad husband. She was curating a better life, piece by piece, right under his nose. Now, I need to know your thoughts, because my jaw is still on the floor. If you felt a rush of satisfaction when Lakota revealed the bank account balance on the big screen, do me a huge favor and smash that like button right now. It helps the algorithm find more people who appreciate a good justice story. And here is the question of the day for the comment section. If you were in Lakota's shoes, would you have done what she did and had him arrested publicly? Or would you have just taken the money and vanished quietly? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you crave more stories about betrayal, karma, and high-stakes drama, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. We have a new story dropping next week involving a cheating billionaire and a prenup that didn't say what he thought it said. You do not want to miss it. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, be careful who you betray, because you never know who really owns the building.